Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today's March 24th, 2022, for Halifax Water Board Commission. I am the chair, Becky Kent, and want to welcome everyone to the meeting. We'd like to acknowledge this land on which Halifax Water operates and provides services is the traditional land of the Mi'kmaq peoples. We make this acknowledgement to reaffirm our commitment to and responsibility in improving relationships and our own understanding of our local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. This meeting is open to the public. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the Halifax Water YouTube channel. The agenda materials are also available on the Halifax Water website. So welcome to another beautiful day here in Halifax. And we have a special piece to insert here, which is the handing over of the chair. There was a vote to I'll be leaving the chair. There's a lot going on, and I want to express how much I've enjoyed this role and be happy to continue in whatever role the commission sees fit in the future. I've enjoyed it, and I can hope that I can continue in some capacity to provide context and contribution as we go forward. So at this stage, Heidi, is there a special verbiage that I have to use or anything? Should we just acknowledge that Colleen Rawlings was nominated and accepted the role of chair, and I was nominated and I have accepted the role of vice chair. So that's the only change. And with that, I'm willing to accept that, Colleen, and I believe we should vote on this here now, Heidi.
So
the motion
is to ratify the in-camera motions, and that will ratify the motion you just spoke.
Okay, good. So would someone like to move that we ratify the in-camera motions?
I can move that.
Thank you, Commissioner Cuttle. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Okay, second Kostya, thank you. And anyone have any questions on that motion? Not, I'll call the question. All in favor say aye.
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 Those in favor nay. And the motion is carried. So with that, I would like to offer the chair role now to new chair, Commissioner Rawlings. Yay!
Thank you, Commissioner Kent. And thank you for your service as chair. You are a hard act to follow.
Thank you. You got this, girls.
So we'll move forward. We have item 1B, the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. You have the agenda in your board package. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda in your package?
I'll move that.
I'll second.
That was Commissioner Kent moved it, and Commissioner Cuttle was second. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay, so the motion is to approve the agenda as posted in your board package. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. Item 2, we have the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on Thursday, March 24th, 2022. Could I have someone make that motion? Commissioner Kolomitsev makes that motion?
Yep, I'll move that the Halifax Water Board approve the minutes of the March 24th meeting, 2022.
I'll second.
Commissioner Zaharov is the seconder. Any discussion on the minutes? We'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I'll refer to Halifax Water staff. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Item 3.
The only issue that was a carryover action item from the minutes is to provide a report on the H2O program. I do note that that has been included in, and I apologize, Kathy, I'm drawing a blank. Which report was it that that included this?
The report on the year-end financial statements has a paragraph with respect to the H2O program performance last year. And the other small item to note related to business arising from the minutes is that the district energy system application that was approved at the March board meeting has been now filed with the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board.
Thank you for those updates. We'll move on to item 4, which is our financial. We have an update on our audited financial statements for the year ending March 31st, 2022. Over to you, Louis.
We did quite an extensive presentation and went through the results in detail at the last Audit Finance Committee. So what I wanted to present here was just a couple of quick slides to sort of provide context to what we've done. So Jake, if you can go to the next slide, please. So probably the most important issue that we have is Grant Thornton, our auditors, as indicated at the board, at our Audit Finance Committee, is prepared to issue a clean audit opinion. So that is the main hope as we go into this. So that is a very positive sign. As we've gone through in the past, we provide financial statement information in 2 formats. One is under the IFRS, the International Financial Reporting Standards, and based on that set of financial rules, we had a surplus of about $45.6 million. Most of that relates to the way the pension plan is accounted for under the International Financial Reporting Standards. The other side is the UARB financial statement and their accounting requirements. We had a loss of $6.4 million, which I will cover off on the next slide. So the financial statements, as I said, prepared in accordance with IFRS. We do provide quite a bit of additional information on how the UARB rules affect our financial results. So that is provided in additional schedules. The reporting standards that we had to follow were essentially the same as the previous year. So nothing significant changed there. On the depreciation side, we are required or through an agreement with the UARB to include the 25% of the depreciation on contributed stormwater assets. We actually have done the accounting and included that into the financial results in the current year. If you can go to the next slide, please. So the UARB format is the one that we primarily talk about to the board. So what I've provided here is a sort of a snapshot on the earnings, statement of earnings in terms of our revenue expenses by category and then also by service. So the top part is by category, the second part is by service. The key issue I wanted to talk about is we had in December projected a operating deficit of approximately $4.7 million. Our actual year-end results came in approximately $1.7 million higher than we thought. So we ended up with a deficit of $6.4 million. You can go to the next slide too. So this is so the main issues that affected that had to do with our revenue forecast. So it was approximately $1.3 million lower than we had forecasted, mostly due to changes in consumption and the number of customers that we had thought were going to be added were slightly lower than we had forecasted. And on the operating side, our expenditures went up by about $700,000. Mostly due to salaries and benefits, chemical costs, which we've talked about, and then the merchant discount fees or the credit card fees that we pay related to primarily to the RDC. You can go to the next slide. And that's my update.
Thank you, Louis. Any questions for Louis? Just a question for Heidi. The motion is to approve the audited financial statements, but I believe we just have drafts in our package.
So that, if I can clarify, Grant Thornton, one of the requirements for them to sign off, and why these are still draft until they're approved, until Grant Thornton sees that the board has approved them, they are technically still draft. So there is a mechanism now that if there are concerns or issues, if the board wanted us to address them, we can address them.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sorry.
That was my only question.
Just to add to that, the general manager and CFO also have to sign a management representation letter effectively saying that none of the conditions or information we've provided essentially has changed since the time the auditors prepared their drafts.
Okay.
Thank you. I was also looking for those signatures. Okay, there's a motion to put forward. Commissioner Kolomeitsev?
Sure. I'll move that the Halifax Water Board approve the audited financial statements for the Halifax Regional Water Commission for the year ended March 31st, 2022.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon is second.
Sure.
Any further discussion? We'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. Moving on to item 4.2, Louis is going to provide information on the audited pension statements for the year ending December 31st, 2021.
So there is a presentation too. So again, this a more extensive conversation was happened at our Audit and Finance Committee, including presentations by Grant Thornton on the key issues and findings. So Jake, if you can go to the next slide. So this is essentially the snapshot of our financial results for the pension plan. Once again, happy to report Grant Thornton is prepared to issue a clean audit opinion on these financial statements as well. The health of the plan continues to improve. And as the end of December 2021, we had a surplus in the plan of approximately $30 million, or approximately our surplus is we're above our assets or liabilities by 127%. So sorry, that math isn't quite right, but it's we do continue to have a surplus. The $30 million is there. The 127% is the increase from last year. Apologize for that. Sorry, Jake, the next slide. So in terms of our revenue, to get to the surplus, the revenue in the current year, approximately 18.8 million. Most of that is the growth in the value of our assets, which continues to improve year over year. Investment income is about $3.4 million. Contributions, which is what we get from both our employees and Halifax Water's contribution, around 6.7 million. Excuse me. Represents 10.34% of payroll for the members of the plan. On the expense side, we continue to pay our pensioners about 4.7 million. We paid out about $800,000 related to terminations and about $100,000 related to one plan member that has died. You can go to the next slide, please. One of the key issues that we flagged in the financial statements is described as a subsequent event, which are events that have happened after the December 31st date. We have seen the value of the assets decrease by about almost $8 million or 4.6%. to the end of April. So that is a significant decrease. But as I mentioned earlier, the state of the plan continues to be very healthy. We continue to be able to make benefits, and the plan will continue to be in a surplus. So that is an item we will continue to monitor, but it is a key item that we flag in the financial statements. And then, as always, happy to answer any questions.
I have one question, please.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Deagle-Gammon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the report. Really good. My question would more be around when is the concern triggered around losing your solvency exemption? I know it meets that threshold of the 85%, but is there any indicator that you would see to say this is when we see that solvency exemption maybe at a little bit of risk?
If you want me to answer that, Louis, I can.
Sure.
So Halifax Water applied for and received a solvency exemption around 2013, and it was after the municipalities were exempted through legislation, through the Pension and Benefits Act and the regs. And we went through a process to demonstrate that we were a municipal entity and to receive the same solvency exemption. So our exemption is a little bit different than a, for instance, a not-for-profit or privately registered pension plan, because our exemption is through the legislation and the regulations. So I don't think there would be a risk of our solvency exemption being removed unless those provisions were being changed for all of the municipal units in Nova Scotia, or there was a change to the Nova Scotia Pension and Benefits Act. As long as we're managing the plan prudently and we're meeting our filing requirements, and they see that we're taking the necessary actions to keep the plan, you know, in good financial position, I can't see that the solvency exemption would be removed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question. I'm trying to understand what the relationship is still between Halifax Water Pension and the HRM pension plan, and if how they're connected.
So the main connection is the HRM pension plan manages the assets of the plan. So Halifax Water does not do its own asset management. We have essentially outsourced that to HRM, and they manage the $174 million that we have presented in these statements as our assets. The HRM pension plan tracks Halifax Water's assets as a percentage of the HRM total assets that they manage, and that represents about 6.5% of the total assets that they manage. So it's a very good positive relationship for us in that it saves us. We don't have to be involved in that day-to-day management, and they're able to get into types of investments that we by ourselves would not be able to. So it is a very important relationship, and but that's where the assets are managed.
And if I could add to that, it's a purely contractual relationship, and there are 3 key contracts governing it. One is a contract between the Halifax Water Employees Pension Plan and the HRM Pension Office. The second is a contract between Halifax Water as a participating employer and the HRM Pension Plan. And the third is a contract between the Halifax Water Employees Pension Plan and the trustee that manages the funds and the investments on behalf of HRM and Halifax Water, which is an organization called Northern Trust. So there are 3 contracts that govern that relationship.
And does Halifax Water have a seat at the table in terms of the management of the fund at HRM, or is it just a contract you have, or do you have a seat there as well?
We do have a seat at the table, but it's a non-voting seat.
Let's see. Okay, great. I'll probably ask same questions again next year, but it's getting there. It's getting there. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you, Commissioner Cuddle. There's a motion to be put forward.
I can do that.
Go ahead, Commissioner Zaharov.
I'll move that the Halifax Water Board approve the audited financial statements of the HRWC Employees Pension Plan, the plan for the year ended December 31st, 2021.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Cuddle will second that. Is there any further discussion or questions? We'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. And on behalf of the board, Louis, please thank your staff for all their hard work in support of 2 clean audits for the year 2021-22.
Thank you, I will.
Item 4.3, actuarial evaluation.
So I don't have a presentation for this. Essentially, it's the formal part of the process that the board went through with our actuary. Earlier, the results are the same as what was presented. You just have the formal report with their opinion around the results in the package. There is a recommendation, as that was previously discussed, to reduce the employee and employer contributions from 10.34% to 9.6%. So that is as part of the motion. And what I will say is that the actuarial valuation is a significant component of the pension plan audit. So Grant Thornton, as part of their process in preparing or giving an opinion on those financial statements, would have gone through this in detail. So we have that part as well.
Are there questions for Louis on the actuarial valuation? So there's a recommendation in the item, but no motion on the agenda. Did the recommendation be turned into a motion? We already made a motion on January 27th.
The earlier motion concerned the assumptions that were used in preparing the valuation. So this is, so I think that was the last one. I think this is more related to the changing of the rates.
Okay, so we'll turn the recommendation into a motion. Heidi?
Yes, my apologies. That was an oversight. That motion should have been reflected on the agenda.
We still have it. I need someone to make a motion based on the recommendation that's going to be on this page on the next.
I can make that motion, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner Diogam.
We move that the Halifax Water Board approve the recommendations contained in the report on actuarial valuation, herein after called the valuation as of January 1st, 2022, including 1, changing the employer and employee's rate of pension current service contributions effective immediately upon updating the payroll software to accommodate, made retroactive to January 1, 2022, and 2, endorse the release of the actuarial report to the Pension and Benefits Committee and to all employee groups.
Thank you, Commissioner Diogam. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Commissioner Zaharov is the seconder. Any further discussion? We'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Thank you, Louis.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to section 5, which is the capital approvals. So just for background of the board, the agenda for this month, the capital approvals were lumped into one motion, which covers the 3 individual capital approval requests that you saw in the board package. This does not limit discussion on any of the items. It is just meant to ensure that we can get to the end of the agenda in the time available. So I'm not sure who's presenting or if there is a presentation.
Colleen, I'm going to give a very brief overview of the 3 items, and we have Sushila Arora, the Manager of Operations here, as well as the senior managers who are responsible for these capital projects from the wastewater and water perspective. So if
Kathy,
there
sorry,
are
I'll just
technical questions.
Sorry, Kathy, just interrupt. Reed has just joined the meeting, so he's here as well, just so you know.
Oh, excellent. Welcome, Reed. So these 3 projects, the first one, the Visit Lake Pump Station, is a $6.8 million project. And you'll see that as a cost mitigation approach, we're bringing this forward to seek approval before tendering to allow for a faster process from the tender closing to award. It's a project that's funded over 3 years. We need an additional $1.25 million in funding, and that would be added to the 3rd year, which would be 2023-2024. The second project is the Churchill Drive transmission main project, and that is essentially $11.4 million. And it's replacing and upsizing sections of some key transmission mains from chain control. The existing mains there you'll see in the report are over 160 years old. There are some supply chain issues for pipe, so the mitigation strategy we're taking for this project, rather than speeding up, we're proposing slowing down, essentially. We're proposing that we would go through the approval process and tendering this year, and we would not be constructing until 2023. And one other thing to flag that's different in this report is that on the advice of our external consultant, we have included a new 30% market contingency in addition to our normal 10% contingency. So the tender will be closing imminently. If in the event the tender results reveal that more capital dollars are required, we may need to come back to the Halifax Water Board for an expedited approval, and then we would go to the URB for approval. If we do have to do that, I anticipate it would be done in July, and it would be done via an electronic vote. The 3rd item there is a wastewater project, and it's the First Lake Pumping Station. And we require an additional $442,000 for a total of $1.2 million for that project. It's a rehabilitation project, and it is also being tendered this month, and it's actually targeted to be constructed in 2022. So that's one where as soon as we get the board approval in place, we'll be proceeding to the URB for approval. So that is the overview of the 3 projects. And if you have any questions about them, we are open for discussion, and we've got a lot of the leaders who support these projects here to address your concerns.
Thank you, Kathy. And as commissioners have questions, please indicate which project your question is on. Go ahead, Commissioner Zaharov.
Madam Chair, I have a question about each of those discussion items. How would you like me to proceed? To just fire away all my questions, or we'll just cover item by item?
How about you do, if they're on individual projects, do them one at a time. If they are questions about all three of them, then you might have to cover them all at once.
And
Okay,
I'm going to suggest that Reed Campbell, Reed, if when the questions come forward, if you could field them and decide whether you wish to answer them yourself or redirect them to one of your staff.
Yeah, and Josh and Tom are with us, I believe. So.
Okay. First question is on the Bissett Lake Pump Station Component Upgrade 5.1. So the implementation is spread over 3 years. Is that due to the complexity of the work, and do you foresee any extended work past those 3 years? And from contingency perspective, only 10% taken into account seems to be quite low comparing to the recommendation put forward by the designer for the Churchill, which is 30%. So this seems to be a pretty lengthy project. So I guess it's a loaded question. First, is there any special reason why it goes over 3 years? And second, if the contingency that you have taken into account, you see that as sufficient, given all the supply chain issues that Halifax Water faces right now?
Yeah, certainly. And Josh, I'll answer the commissioner's second part. And if you want to get ready to answer the first part about schedule, that would be appreciated. So on the contingencies, as part of our last IRP, the Utility and Review Board asked us to standardize the contingencies we use for construction. And the standard contingency we do use, which we've applied to Churchill when we have a detailed design in hand, is 10%. I think in this case, there's two factors that drive construction, the construction cost volatility right now. One, as you mentioned, one is supply chain issues, and the other one is contractor availability. On this one, which is a multidiscipline project, we're finding it's a little less volatile than our linear projects. And the pre-construction estimate that we do have is based on current market conditions. So things are volatile. Am I as confident as I might have been a year ago that we're going to get a tender price that comes in close to the estimate? It's just with the volatility, that's hard to say yes to. But the construction estimate that we have right now is based on current market conditions. On Churchill, one of the factors where the contractor has or the consultant has put in that higher contingency is it's a large pipe project for us. There's a limited number of contractors, and we know they're very, very busy. And that's part of our strategy, is to tender it this year for building next year. Hopefully we'll get on their order books. They'll make a commitment to that project. And also particularly it's the large diameter pipe is the supply chain thing. And we're hoping if we can get delivery commitments for next year in the middle of 2022. But that type of work we're just finding is a little more volatile at the moment. Josh, did you want to talk about the construction scheduling? This is Josh DeYoung. He's our manager of wastewater infrastructure engineering.
Sure. Thanks, Reed. As far as the schedule being over 3 years, it was mainly the project was identified in 21-22 to initiate the design process. So that process started mid to late through the year, and then here we are approaching the tender phase, and we are halfway through 22-23 almost. So due to the construction being approximately 12 months, that's kind of what's spanning us into the 3-year period. If that answers your question.
Yeah, so it's from the day that you start the design all the way through tendering and then to execution. Okay, I understand. Yeah. Thanks. Madam Chair, can I go to the next item, or does anyone maybe want to cover this one?
Does anyone else have a question before Commissioner Zaharov continues? No? Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Okay. We'll just take one question from Commissioner Kolomitsev, and then I'll come back.
I just had a question about, as a whole, over the 3 different projects. Some of the projects had previous funding approved, Is this additional funding, or is this the entirety of the funding, including those previously approved? For example, for project 1, I think 50,000 had already been approved. And is that included in the 6.8 million, or would it be 6.8 million minus that 50,000? Or project 2, it looks like there was already 250 and 135,000 approved. Is that part of the 11.379 million?
Yeah, in each of those cases, the large number approval that we're asking for is the entire project cost, which includes design work we've already done.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Zaharov?
Yeah, next question is on the Churchill Drive upgrade. So I was looking at the board package page 201 with the project cost estimates. I see so few questions. So the Halifax Water staff part is, I think, is roughly $175,000, which is roughly just above 1% of the overall budget. So this project seems to be fairly complex. Is the Halifax Water staff, charges and allowances that are being added here, is this as a standard rate, or I'm just trying to to understand, because it seems to be fairly low compared to the overall project budget and complexity.
Tom, do you want to, this is Tom Gorman. He's our manager of water infrastructure engineering. Tom, can you speak to that? Oh, you're on mute, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Can now.
Okay, sorry. Yes, thank you. Want to congratulate Colleen Rawlings on her new role as chair before I start. I'm looking at the cost breakdown where, there's communications, public engagement. That is essentially a communications allowance that our communications team has made for provisions for sort of public engagement, and that could be sort of radio communication, that could be ads in the newspaper. The geotechnical is kind of for testing. We're anticipating unusual conditions there. We may have some periodic slate. We may have some unsuitables. So we're making some allowances for additional testing in there. We already have provision for inspection through our consultant. The engineering design, 35,000 is an estimate. It's probably reasonable based on past practice. And the project management, we also are working with HRM. So it's a little bit unique, but it's probably not too far off the normal, I guess. And I'm not sure that's much of an answer, but it's in the normal range. And I'm not sure we have a good rule of thumb. It's kind of depending on the level of complexity and whether or not we have a consultant assisting us. So if we were doing it ourselves, we would probably have a slightly higher percentage in some of those components, but we do have WSP engaged to assist in some of the construction inspection and project administration, but that's kind of an estimate more for this project itself.
I see. Thanks, because I've noticed that this project requires some coordination with CN and HRM. So to me, it sounded quite like, heavy undertaking. So I thought that the estimates here might be a little bit low, but if you're comfortable, that's fine. And the other question on this table that I had is I couldn't make the, sorry if I'm going too much into the weeds, but I couldn't make it from the construction subtotal of 10.284 million to 10.807. The subtotal calculation, there is a difference of close to $500,000. Could you please explain the subtotal construction subtotal to subtotal move? Because maybe I'm not doing the math properly.
I may not be able to do it right off the top of my head myself. If there's a math error, then we'll certainly clean that up. But I'm looking at that and I see what you're seeing, and I think I'd have to sort of say we'll have to clean that up.
Okay, so from I guess it's question to Heidi. from budget approval perspective, that the approval be contingent on Tom, doing the checks on the calculations, or how do we proceed with the budget approval? Because it's a fairly substantial amount here.
Yeah, he's right. It's probably the difference of about $500,000, Heidi, depending on whether what's there is written and there's an explanation, or whether we did the math wrong. The total budget could potentially go down, however.
And so that's the good news, I guess, on some level, is that the ask in the motion is for an amount that will ultimately be higher. But to your point, Kostya, I think that the motion can be amended somewhat, and I'll work on that wording simply to reflect that the changes to the amounts requested will be adjusted to reflect the appropriate numbers, expecting that they'll go down. So just leave that with me while you continue your questions.
Yeah, I think for the sake of clarity, there may be some certainty there. We have the consultant sub-estimate, which is not included in construction. We have the WSP estimate for the project, which is 9.8, and we have the 430,000. So I believe that wasn't included in the construction subtotal, but was included in the other total. But we will clarify that.
Would it give you enough time if we continue to the next agenda item and then defer this motion until after the next agenda item? Yes.
Tom, are you able to clarify that while we talk about the next one?
I will do that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Last one for me, Madam
Go
Chair.
ahead.
On the just a moment, sorry, I'm just sharing screens here on my PC. First Lake Pumping Station project. So apologies for going, back again to contingency, because we had a few projects brought back with the request for increased funding. So I'm just trying to mitigate those going forward. So for the project value of 1.2 million, the request for contingency is 82,000. And again, given all the supply chain issues, is that something that you guys are comfortable that you can execute, or that will come back to the board for review and approval as the execution will start? If the budget will not be sufficient. I'm just thinking if we can support you with appropriate approvals right now, and so you won't have to come back if and when something happens.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner, and that's noted. And I think my answer to the approach is similar to the first one. And I think that is something that we've wrestled with as we've put these reports together, and we also have to justify the contingencies to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. So there's sort of a balance. Do we put in a reasonable contingency? This spring with this board and the URB, we've dealt with some projects that were, in fact, now they had some uniqueness to them, but 125% over the estimate. So I don't think we want to be in a position of going to the URB saying, well, we'd like 100% contingency or 150% contingency. So what we're trying to do is pick reasonable contingencies that are based on our strategy and the board's expectations for the work we did in the IRP. And I think what we're hoping, and the URB's been good about this, and this board has, if we do get a contingency, let's say the price comes in 20%, you've already dealt with the merits of the project. We'll come back to you quickly and present the facts and our rationale for proceeding, and hope we can get an approval in an expedited manner from both this board and the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board.
Understood. Thanks. I'm done, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Zaharov. If there are no further questions, we're going to defer this motion to after item 6. Any further questions? Thank you, Tom and Josh, for that. Okay, moving on. Item 6, the Corporate Balance Scorecard 2022-23 program and year-end results.
So this is me, and it's a relatively fast item, hopefully. I'm going to try to go through this quickly. So we have in your board report the report that went to the March board meeting that has now been deferred to June to set the targets for 22-23. And because we are now in June, instead of showing you the projected results, we're able to show you the year-end results. So we've kind of combined that into one report. There is one change proposed for 22-23 on the targets, which is the adjustment, adjusting the measurement of how we measure lost time incidents. That was something that was presented to the Environment, Health and Safety Committee back in March, and they had approved. And that would align us with industry best practice, and we would be targeting a 0.5% reduction in lost time incidents every year in each of the next 4 years, with the ultimate goal of getting to 0.5 or less lost time incidents. So that will really be setting the bar higher for Halifax Water in terms of safety and lost time incidents. So I'll show you our current measures when we get to that slide. So next slide, please. So we've had a corporate balance scorecard for quite a long time, 22 years, and it keeps our employees aligned on the strategic objectives. We have critical success factors and organizational indicators that are directly related to the mission, vision, values of Halifax Water and the business plans that Halifax Water's board approves. Next slide. And this is just the mission and vision of Halifax Water, which has not changed. We're focused on providing world-class service to our customers and our environment. And you may remember that one of our business plan objectives this year is to actually review our mission and vision and review our corporate balance scorecard in the fall with a view to possibly making some updates and adjustments next year. Next slide. And these are the 8 critical success factors that we currently have. And you may recall that we have grouped our business plan this year according to 4 pillars. And it's kind of convenient that our 8 critical success factors line up quite nicely and can be organized in accordance with our 4 pillars, which are people, health, safety and environment, regulatory compliance, and operational excellence. Next slide. And the organizational indicators are the measures of our performance that are set within each critical success factor category. Currently, there are 30 organizational indicators, and you wouldn't really want to have a lot more than that. And these are the top indicators that, you know, we report on to the board, we report on to the municipality as part of our accountability report, and we also share with the public at our annual general meeting, or we share with the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board when we're doing applications. Within each department, though, there are also performance measures that, various performance measures that departments would be tracking. So I don't want you to think that 30 things that are in the corporate balance scorecard as our organizational indicators are our only things that we're tracking. We do have a very active culture of performance measurement and accountability at Halifax Water. Next slide. So Halifax Water has an organizational performance award program, and this is a program that is meant to incent employees to work together as a team towards achieving the corporate balance scorecard targets. And the program pays for itself because there is a gateway indicator called the operating expense to revenue indicator, and we lower that each year. And if we're achieving the operating expense to revenue ratio, then we're generating enough savings actuals compared to budget that we can finance the program. So you'll see a little later on in the presentation that if we get a threshold score of 7 or more on these 12 indicators, then an organizational award is paid to every employee at Halifax Water who's contributed to achievement of the goals and has been present in the workplace for at least the majority of the year. I believe we measure it as 9 months. And the 12 organizational indicators that the program is linked to are the ones that can be most objectively measured. Next slide. So our year-end results, I want to pause here to say that we did notice an error in the report attachments and in this presentation. I'm pleased to say that on high quality drinking water, we actually have 2 of the OIs which should be green. So the bacteriological test number that's shown is the 21-22 result that is showing 96.2, should be 99.94, and that box should be green. The bacteriological test number for wastewater is actually what's shown in this box, and it was supposed to be the bacteriological test results for water samples. So that number should be 99.94. 2 things to note on this slide: the high quality drinking water, the adherence with the water safety plan for all water systems, and the percentage of sites achieving targets. 2 years in a row, we have not met that target. The 2021 results were impacted by the Cobequid Road water main breaks, and also changing demand patterns within our systems caused by the pandemic impacted some of our test results. That's still a factor in 21-22. And so the area where we are having challenges is with disinfection byproducts. And there have been a couple of issues with respect to water quality related to a couple of our reservoirs this year, and water coming from the reservoirs. There's continuing to be a few significant water main breaks, like the Herring Cove Road one that occurred this year. And then finally, the consumption out at the airport has not returned, or had not returned, to pre-pandemic levels for the majority of 21-22, meaning that there are some challenges with the Bennery Lake water system. Not enough water is being used, resulting in disinfection byproducts number being high. And the bottom row on this slide, the customer satisfaction, we've had a really good positive increase in customer satisfaction about water quality, and that is measured through our customer survey that's conducted annually by Narrative Research. Next slide. So on the service excellence, we have 3 organizational indicators which are positive. We've achieved our target. We have 1 that is negative. It was nice to see the water service outage hours return to a good positive number. 2021, of course, we had higher than average, higher than targeted water service outage hours because of the Cobequid Road water main breaks. In 21-22, we're back into a more normal season, and we have achieved the target for the year. The bottom row, the average speed of answer, refers to how our customer care center is dealing with customers and the percentage of customer calls that get answered within 20 seconds, which is a really good high standard consistent with best practice industry call center metrics. We only achieved 60.4% in 2021, or excuse me, 2021-22. But our call volumes increased by 10,000 calls this year, and we had some staffing challenges covering staff vacations last summer also, that also contributed. We are on track to make some positive step forward there this year. We've got some additional staff and staffing plans that should help address our call center concerns. And the other thing that was driving the 10,000 extra calls last year, there were a couple of things going on. One is continued customer enrollments in the customer portal and us promoting that. And the second was we did really try to get more proactive in our collection activity. So as a result of that, more customers are calling to establish payment plans, which is great because that reduces the number of disconnections for non-payment or customer complaints that really escalate. Next slide. Responsible financial management. We're fully positive this year. We've achieved all of the targets that were set. So the first one is the operating expense revenue to ratio I mentioned. The second one we measure is the average cost per customer connection. So we look at the operating costs per customer connection as a metric. And finally, the operating costs for wastewater per customer connection. You'll see that last year we didn't hit our target. This year we did achieve our target. And you can see over on all of these slides, the column on the right are the targets proposed for this year. And on the financial target slide, you will see that these targets do change year to year. And the reason the targets changed is because they are updated to reflect the budgets that get approved by the Halifax Water Board. Next slide. Effective asset management. You'll see there's a mix of some organizational indicators we've achieved and some that we have not. The water leakage control target we did not hit, and I have mentioned for the last couple of years and probably in our business plan that we are looking at revisiting what is a realistic target for water leakage control. Right now we have a very aggressive target, and when you consider the fact that we do have a very good leak detection program, but we're always going to have some water main breaks. We do have aging infrastructure, and we have a plan to get to our recommended level of spend for the integrated resource plan. But we do want to revisit at what point we've reached the economic tipping point where our target is too aggressive. So we want to get to that this year. So you may see when we come forward in the fall a change to the recommended target for 2023-24. That target in the past had used to be 180 as liters per service connection per day as a target. We had changed it to 160 to 170. We haven't achieved it over the last 2 years. I'm going to highlight also the two other things on this slide. Peak flow reduction from wet weather management capital projects. There's nothing reported in terms of a result from 21-22, just because the capital project that was tied to was not completed in time for us to do the measurement for the required period, because we like to be measuring the peak flow reduction during a wet weather period, which would be the fall. So we will have results to report on that next year. And finally, capital budget expenditures. We've talked about that exhaustively at all of our board meetings when we bring forward updates on the capital spend. And we have not achieved that target. And that's a center point of our business plan, and also our rate application to increase our institutional capacity so that we can improve on our timing of capital project delivery. One positive note I will say, though, is that at the end of March 31st, the number of assets or number of projects that were active was higher than the previous year. And also the dollar value of assets under construction was higher than the previous year. So I am seeing a little bit of positive momentum there. Next slide. Workplace safety and security. The thing I want to highlight here is the safe driving. We achieved that target this year at great improvement. So 3.36 traffic accidents per 1 million kilometers driven. And we had a program this year that was called the GOAL program, Get Out and Look. It involved stickering our vehicles to remind people to do circle checks before backing up. And there were many visits to depots, and I did some myself, just reminding employees of the importance of doing circle checks, because the majority of traffic accidents we were having were in our own yards with vehicles backing up. So we have had some improvement there. The lost time incidents item on this slide, which is in the middle above the safe driving target, that is the target I referenced that the Environment Health Safety Committee had approved that we adjust for this year. So we're changing the measurement method, and that's explained in the report, and it's a change to bring us in line with industry standards. So you can see that we did achieve that metric this year, and we're setting a target for next year in this table. And finally, the training and safety talks. We didn't achieve those safety targets, and the number of employees trained or recertified, we made a bit of improvement from 59% last year up to 70%, but we're still playing catch up as a result of a backlog of training that arose during the last 2 years as a result of the pandemic. So some training courses not offered, and also public health restrictions restricting the number of employees we could get in rooms at one time, and also large meeting room availability impacted our training numbers. And on the safety talks, we have a reporting issue. There's a significant lag between groups doing safety talks and actually doing the follow-through step to report that they've done the safety talks. So that's an area we're working on. Next slide. Regulatory compliance, we're in the green. We met all of those organizational indicators. And next slide. Environmental stewardship, you can see that we have a pattern that's similar to the prior year. We had a target in 2021 to inspect 500 ICI properties by pollution prevention. What we achieved was actually 361 properties inspected. And you can see we've adjusted our target for next year to hopefully be a little bit more realistic. But the ICI inspections are impacted by a couple of things. The last 2 years, they've been impacted just by the pandemic to some extent, and difficulty scheduling inspections and getting into businesses. And this year, we've also got some staffing challenges. So we're hopeful that by reducing the target to 250, we'll actually be able to achieve it next year. Energy management, I'm really thrilled with the good work that Halifax Water energy management program is producing. So we had targeted 3% reduction associated with capital projects, and what we achieved was 7.76. And finally, the biosolids number is great. We've hit that biosolids residual handling target. Next slide. Motivated and satisfied employees. We achieved a target for grievances divided by, or number of arbitrations divided by grievances. We are still not achieving the last 3 motivated and satisfied employees. The percentage of jobs filled with internal candidates is 68%. We do have to do a review of that target to make sure that the jobs that we're including in that measurement are good jobs to be including. So for example, if we added 2 cybersecurity specialists this year, they're net new positions to the organization. So we wouldn't have anybody internally who could qualify and get into those jobs. So we need to go through our jobs one by one to make sure that what is reflected in this target are actually jobs where we have a career ladder and a succession pool of people who can advance into those jobs. So we'll be undertaking some adjustments perhaps to that metric this year. The employee satisfaction survey result, we get a B+, but we're very, very close to an A-. So we're hopeful that that's going to move in the right direction next year. Finally, the number of days of absenteeism. This may be a target that we will remove when we come back to adjust the corporate balance scorecard. Due to COVID and the ongoing presence of COVID, we are really taking a position that we don't want our employees to come to work when they're sick. When in doubt, don't come to work. So I think that having a target that is linked to average number of days of absenteeism may be sending the wrong message. Next slide. And this is just an example of how we calculate that organizational award. So the highest score we can get is 12. And the maximum potential award is $1,000 per employee. Most years it runs around the 700 to 800 range. And there have been 2 or 3 years since the program's inception where there was no organizational award because the targets weren't met. Next slide. And this is just the results for this year. So the maximum score possible is 12. The result for this year is a score of 9. So it is a good result, and these are the results that will be presented to employees and also to council when we do our accountability report. Next slide. So in summary, the organizational award program is not a given. Corporate balance scorecard has a really successful and positive history at Halifax Water. What you're approving today are the 22-23 targets for this fiscal year. And if we achieve them, then we'll come back next June and report on what the results are. And an organizational award may be paid out if we achieve the targets that you set for us. And that's it.
Thank you, Kathy. And congratulations to all the staff for their hard work going into a great result on the corporate balance scorecard. Are there questions from the board? Commissioner Cuddle?
Yeah, I always love the corporate balance scorecard because it's just such a good snapshot, right, of where things are going. I guess the one that, a couple of things stood out for me, but one was, I'm just trying to get back to my right page here, was just trying to understand the capital budget expenditures, percentage of budget spent by end of fiscal year, which seems significantly low to me if we're coming in at 28 and our target is 70 to 80. Is that because I'm just trying to understand like why we're not spending the budget on capital projects? Is there a delay in the work, or what's happening there?
So there are two things going on, and Reed is going to probably add to my answer. But when this target was set, the board had a fair amount of debate about the fact that should we be measuring based on the capital budget for the current year, or should we be measuring based on the total capital available to spend, or some other combination of metrics? In addition to the current year capital budget, Halifax Water at any given point in time for the last few years has had between 350 to 500 million of previously authorized capital from previous capital budgets also in play. So there is a bit of a timing difference that we need to reconcile in setting these targets. And it's complicated by the fact that we have A, multi-year projects, and B, a lot of significant projects right now that it's difficult to predict the timing of and the complexity of the land-related issues. So 2 examples, one would be the Cogswell redevelopment. That is in our budget. It's a fairly good chunk of dollars, and it hasn't proceeded along the same timeline that we thought it would, because council didn't approve the tender until September of 2021. We do not yet have a cost sharing agreement with the municipality on the Cogswell redevelopment. So no money started to flow on that project. Another example would be the Fairview Cove Trunk Sewer Project, which is a $17 million project approved, I think, 2 capital budgets ago. And we haven't been able to negotiate a easement with the Halifax Port for the alignment of a tunnel for the trunk sewer, though we're close to getting it done now. So there are a lot of big projects that are actually tied up at the moment because of external timing issues that we don't have control of. And Reed, perhaps you want to speak to the internal capacity issues and process issues. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. I don't know what happened there, but I think, Kathy, you addressed most of the issues. I think one thing, I have talked to you before about capacity issues. We're adding some staff this year. We're going to be realigning how we do some things. And one thing I think has happened is as our capital budget has risen and pressure has come on to deliver projects, what has perhaps suffered a little bit is some of the planning issues. So what we would address, if we go back to the example that Kathy mentioned of Fairview Cove, where we've been for about 15 months now dealing with a land issue, and we still have a few months ahead of us in dealing with it, we would identify those issues earlier in the project cycle and then hopefully put more realistic budget years. So, I mean, the project's not going to get delivered necessarily earlier, but we would put it in the right budget year and perhaps be less optimistic about when we're actually going to deliver it. And I think the other thing of note is, although the percentage is low, we are still delivering about $70 to $90 million of capital every year. So if I go back a couple of years, we took a deliberate decision to delay the Cowie Reservoir, which is being built behind our headquarters building. We decided to delay it into a next construction season to tender it at a time where we could get better pricing. So that project did not get delivered in its budget year, but it's getting delivered this year as we speak. So that work is going on. So there are some process improvements we can do so that the capital expenditures compared to the budget are much more predictable, but we are delivering a significant volume every year.
Is that all your questions, Commissioner Cuddle?
Yep.
Commissioner Lovelace?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have, and thank you for the presentation. You know, it's amazing to see all of the work that we're doing to get a sense of the scope, which is huge. And at the same time, we have to be nimble and be ready to react to situations that are coming our way that are not potentially included in this. And so I just want to talk about high quality drinking water right now due to the recent story and the outbreak of polio in the UK, and that has been linked to a resurgence of polio in the UK, in London specifically, but also that it's being found in drinking water. And so I just, you know, when we think about how we can react to some of these issues, I know that we have a research project right now, and we're working with university and COVID in our drinking water system. But I just wanted to get a sense of how quickly we're able to react to these other kinds of diseases, which potentially could impact our community, even though there's a significant amount of people who have been vaccinated. You know, we do have youth in particular who may not have received their vaccination during that COVID period, for example. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to our ability to react to some of these potential concerns with our drinking water.
And I'm just going to jump in. That is a great question. We're just talking about the corporate balance scorecard. So if there's a short answer to do with the performance, and then there's potentially a longer answer that maybe we need to table to make sure we address Commissioner Lovelace's question.
This is a significant topic. I think that if there's an interest in it, we record that question and we will come back through the Environment, Health and Safety Committee and then to the board with a report. And it's a great linkage to come talk to you about our update on our water safety plan. So with your permission, perhaps we could bring it to Environment, Health, Safety, and then bring it to the board at the September meeting.
So I could ask a much more succinct question then. And in addition to you know, looking forward at the next committee meeting. So when it says adherence to 5 objectives of water safety plan for all water systems, those 5 objectives of water safety plan, I understand they're under the regulations of Department of Environment, Public Health, and various legislative bodies. So within those legislative bodies then, when I see bacteriological tests for total coliform, you know, I'm hoping we're looking for more than just coliform. I guess that's my point. If we're actually looking for items such as communicable diseases.
So right now, because of the fact that we're a public utility, you know, we do follow the guidelines established by Nova Scotia Environment and the Canadian Drinking Water Quality Guidelines. So as things change there, we would change what we're monitoring for. I would say the only thing we're not mandated to monitor for, that we're monitoring for right now, would be SARS-CoV-2 through our research partnership with Dalhousie University. If we wanted or were asked to do more, then that would be a bit of a program expansion that would need to get built into revenue requirements and go to the URB for approval. And Reid, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Commissioner Lovelace, the main reason we monitor E. coli and bacteria is that is a regulatory sentinel monitoring thing. So a lot of bacteriological things take days, in some cases weeks, to get meaningful results back. And so they're not good as a regulatory tool and a monitoring thing. So the Colalert test that we use for bacteria, that turns around in less than 24 hours. So that's what the Nova Scotia Department of Environment, it's universal across North America, imposes on us. We can go out and take, I think we're doing about 50 tests a day on that order across the distribution system. And it gives us a good indication of the how well our treatment process is working, and more importantly, how well our disinfection process is working. In the background, we're doing all kinds of, in some cases it's broad-based research, in some cases there's more complex bacteriological testing we're doing, but it takes days and weeks to come back. And that gives us an indication to boost our treatment processes or in the longer term, perhaps change them, but they're not useful for day-to-day monitoring the health of the drinking water for people.
Okay, thanks. I recognize that was a loaded question, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Reid. Thanks.
And it will be noted in the minutes for the follow-up through environment, health, and safety for Commissioner Lovelace. One follow-up, Commissioner Cuddle?
Yeah, just on the same metric there. You know, when you see the high quality drinking water and you see a gap of 10 points, I don't know how significant a gap of 10 points is. I mean, is that, you know, you think like, you know, drinking water quality, it's either like pass or fail. Either we're hitting the target or we're not. But so when we're missing by 10 points, what does that really indicate?
Yeah, I can, if you will, Kathy. That is the score based on 5 parameters, and I've been out of that business now for 15 months, so I can't remember them all, but there's a mixture of things that we're required to monitor. 2 of them are 2 types of disinfection byproducts. Another one is it's a very high percentile on our filter plant removal. And the bar on those is set very, very high to start with. So for instance, to get 100%, let's say on disinfection byproducts, first of all, we've set a target that's beyond what Health Canada requires us to do, and then we're measuring to the target that we've set for ourselves. And we've got about 16 monitoring locations for disinfection byproducts. So let's say if we missed one of those by 10%, that might knock us down, you know, 5-10 points, something like that. So we are maintaining regulatory compliance on all of those, even though we've not met the corporate balance scorecard target.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I know that we don't want to, you know, complicate some of these charts too much, but I think that's a really important point about these targets are set by Halifax Water and some are even beyond industry standards. Is there a way that we could incorporate into the chart what is the industry requirement and the differential about how Halifax Water has set a target that is maybe exceeding?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, in the essence of time, there's a motion in the agenda. Do I have a commissioner prepared to make that motion?
All right, I can move that.
Commissioner Cuddle?
I move that the Halifax Water Board approve 1, corporate balance scorecard targets for the 2022-23 fiscal year as detailed in the attached corporate balanced scorecard summary. And 2, the organizational award program for 2022-23 tied to the outcomes of 12 organizational indicators as detailed in the attached presentation.
I can second that.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon for second. Any further discussion or questions? We'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Just checking if item 5 is ready for a motion.
I believe it is. I'll ask Tom Gorman to, there he is.
Hey, Tom.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to go back and check. The numbers are correct. I think we missed a black heavy line to sort of help clarify some subtotals. So yeah, the bottom lines are valid. If you look, the construction subtotal is additive of the 9.8 plus the 430. The 10.8 down below includes the 10.2 plus the consulting subtotal plus the time below the 30 and the 30 and the 35 and the 40. So the numbers do add up. It's unfortunately a heavy black line as a subtotal would have resolved some of the confusion. I apologize for that.
The motion is correct as it stands, Heidi?
Yes.
That is correct.
Thanks for
Okay,
clarification, Tom. I appreciate it. I also texted you. Probably haven't seen it. I noticed that the consultant subtotal was not included in the overall in the construction subtotal. So thank you for clarification and apologies for the confusion. I'm prepared to make the motion if that's okay, Madam
Go
Chair.
ahead, Commissioner Zaharoff.
Yep. I'll move that the Halifax Water Board approve capital project items Fund Point 1 to 5.3 as described in the board reports at a total cost of $18,621,000.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Cuddle. Go straight to the votes. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Item 7, diversity, equity, and inclusion policy.
There's no presentation with this, and our manager of human resources, Rochelle Belmare, sends her regrets. She was supposed to be here today, but unfortunately is not able to attend. The diversity, equity, and inclusion policy is something that has actually been shared with our 2 union groups and will be coming forward at the September board meeting. This should be labeled diversity, equity, and inclusion framework, which is the report in your package. And basically it's a framework to set 3-year goals. It's a check-in with the board who had asked us to develop a diversity and equity and inclusion framework and a plan for the next 3 years. And the framework proposes 5 high-level objectives and gives you the targets of how we will measure whether we're successful or not. And we're just presenting it to the board to get your approval to make sure we're on the right track. And we will be reporting back on progress and developing our implementation plans and business plans to ensure that we're moving ahead with these 5 high-level objectives that are in the report.
Thank you, Kathy. Are there any questions on the information in the board package?
I had a quick question. Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Based
Go
on
ahead,
the
Commissioner Zaharov.
on the objectives, I guess question for Kathy. I was wondering if expanding the employee knowledge on cultural and religious diversity would be one of the objectives to have in the top, alongside with the other not less important ones. I see that the cultural backgrounds, it's in the number in the objective number 1, increase the percentage of employees who agree that the workplace reflects a diverse cultural background, but perhaps it would be a good idea to incorporate, expansion of employee knowledge in this area as well.
Yes, and the reason it wasn't included as one of the 5 high-level objectives is because we had started doing that 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, we started incorporating something called diversity moments in each edition of our pipeline post, our internal newsletter. And we have started doing different things to mark different cultural or religious celebrations throughout the year. We're communicating with employees to tell them what's going on in the community or a little bit of the history and about the event. So because we had already started doing that, that's why we didn't put it as an objective of, something new that we were doing. But we can make sure we can edit our framework so that that's not lost as a priority.
Yep, that would be great. Thank you.
Any other? Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Lovelace.
Thank you so much. I just have a quick question about the kind of use of the term gender equality, and wondering, there's lots of different definitions of gender equality. There's some specific frameworks to use when we do an analysis and when we're monitoring the implementation of gender equality policies. So I'm just wondering, I didn't see any mention of gender-based analysis, so I'm just trying to get a sense of, when we're talking about gender equality, what's the benchmark that we're using?
So within year, I believe it's either 2 or 3 of the objectives, the gender-related one, the gender equality one. One of the things we are planning to do is have an external consultant come in and do a review from a compensation perspective. We know that our compensation and wage rates for unionized staff and non-unionized staff, we're not concerned that there's any gender inequity there. But one thing that we have not done, which some other organizations have done, and we suspect there may be a bit of a difference there, is the starting salaries that employees with similar education levels or years of experience come in with. We're observing that female employees tend to accept the salary that's offered to them, whereas the male employee may negotiate more. So as a result of that, we do see a little bit of a gap between starting salaries that may be gender related. We also suspect there may be a bit of a gap between performance bonuses and performance appraisals that may be gender related. So those are the 2 aspects we may be looking at. And if you're considering gender equality in terms of male, female, non-binary, that's also an entire component of that. So when we say gender, we're inclusively referring to whatever a person self-identifies as. And when we bring forward the diversity and equity and inclusion policy to the board in September, I think you'll be seeing some of that. And that would be something that would be going to the board executive committee before we bring it to the actual board. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I was just trying to get, we see, you see the word gender equality, but there's no clear understanding of how that's been defined. And that's why, the Government of Canada moved towards that gender-based analysis, so that we're removing that binary approach from our policy. So thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that.
Any other questions for Kathy? We have a motion in the agenda. Is there a commissioner that will move that?
I can do that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Move that the Halifax Water Board endorse the diversity, equity, and inclusion framework goals for 2022-23 to 2024-25 as set out in the report dated March 15th, 2022.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovelace. Seconded. Moved by Commissioner Deagle-Gammon. Any further questions or discussion? We'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion's carried. Item 8, Stormwater Infrastructure Cost Sharing Memorandum of Understanding with HRM.
This is somewhat of a housekeeping item, I would categorize it as. We have had cost sharing agreements in the past with the municipality with respect to stormwater infrastructure. And this is an attempt to put something with more permanence in place. On May 3rd, HRM Council approved the approach to cost sharing on stormwater projects. And of course, because it's an agreement, it's also subject to Halifax Water Board approval and URB approval. If the Halifax Water Board approves it today, then we will be submitting it to the URB for approval. And the MOU covers deep stormwater installation projects, operating improvements in upsizing and upgrading stormwater assets, and also projects identified in the NDMP, which I believe stands for National Disaster Mitigation Plan. And the organizations have been working hard to establish clear roles and responsibilities for cost sharing. And you can see there's a very useful table in the report that specifies for different types of projects, whether the municipality, Halifax Water, or the private property owner is responsible. So I think this will serve as a useful communication tool with customers once we get the MOU actually all agreed to and signed off.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Lovelace.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I have a question about MOU with provincial government, considering we also have provincial assets such as trails within our municipal boundary, and whether or not there is an MOU with them. And only because this road transfer and infrastructure transfer has created the need, I guess, to understand the relationship between these trails, the Provincial Department of Natural Resources, and HRM and Halifax Water. The other question I'm wondering about is the liability, I guess, or risk of potential assumption of those properties that are currently private. As we're seeing more and more issues with private roads and private infrastructure, especially with regards to HRM's area rate limitations with capital costs for that private infrastructure, wondering where that sits, if this conversation is taking place right now about assuming ownership of some of these private infrastructure, and what does that look like down the road for Halifax Water as a liability?
So I'm going to see if Brad Anguish is still on the call. He may wish to speak to this. Essentially, that would be a matter between the municipality and the province, and we're restricted to management and responsibility for the stormwater infrastructure that's in the public right of way. Kenda, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, through to the commissioner, that's basically how that would function if there was some infrastructure item that we had to coordinate on. We would. I think there might be some historical arrangements that were made on specific items between the municipality and the province, but Brad, I think, has joined back in, and so he can speak to those in any detail. And then with respect to the private issues of private roads, Again, until the private road becomes a public road and the assets are taken over by both HRM and Halifax Water, there would not be an arrangement or mechanism for us to spend funds on those. But we are working with HRM on the unaccepted streets project and how that might impact us. So.
Okay, that's good to know. So at least that, there's some conversations to develop some kind of a framework and understanding for potential costs down the road, especially considering a lot of those unaccepted streets are, well, they just haven't been maintained well. So, there's definitely going to be some costs there and implications to neighboring properties as well, and neighboring infrastructure that could potentially require upsizing, for example. So anyway, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Brad, was
Mr.
there anything you
English?
wanted to add to the answers that Kenda and I provided?
No, not really. Kenda really nailed it there at the end. I think the the commissioner got what she needed, but the only thing I can say is, it very much varies on a case-by-case basis, especially with the province. So without kind of looking at each location, it's hard. All I'll say is, as a result of the transfer, obviously we're in close communication with the province, good, bad, or otherwise, hammering through some of the challenges. Other than that, large private communities, which I think, exist within the commissioner's district, those are things we're going to have to deal with on a much broader basis at HRM Council. And if there is a real desire to change the way those communities are managed in order to manage the long-term risk that I know the councillor is seeing. So I'll leave my comments there. Thank you.
One follow-up, Commissioner Cuddle?
Yeah, well, it's not a follow-up to that question, but it is related around the stormwater costs. And I know one of the things we're looking at is how we use the natural environment as a tool for stormwater mitigation. And what I'm seeing happen, and this is again, I think a relationship between the province, the municipality, and the Water Commission, is when developers go in and they cut down all the trees and they scrape the ground of the permeable topsoil, it's starting to create flooding issues in areas where we haven't had flooding issues before, impacting the Halifax water infrastructure. So I'm wondering, and Brad, I don't know if you have any comments about this too. I mean, there's going to be a cost. I just don't know how that's accounted for right now. I feel like the infrastructure that we're talking about is kind of the pipes and the catchment basins and the hard infrastructure. Is there a way to account for the soft infrastructure, so to say, in how we're moving forward and the unrelated consequences of current development practices on our infrastructure?
Could I suggest that that may be a question that needs to go to HRM? I don't think it's something that, certainly not dealt with in this report. Just I'm not sure what the right venue is, whether it's a Halifax Water Board meeting or an Environmental Health Safety Committee meeting or a municipal meeting.
So just real quick, coming out of our SW3 meeting, which is a joint meeting with the province, HRM, and ourselves, we've committed to set up a meeting probably July-ish based on schedules to start looking at some of these reoccurring issues that we collectively are being faced with respect to impacts from development activities. And so we're going to be forming a working group between the three agencies to chat through some of these things. It's very early stages, but otherwise we do coordinate and collaborate when an event happens, unfortunately, but we're going to try and work through some of the common issues.
Right, and I think an important part, I'm so glad to hear that, because I think this is really important in terms of our kind of Halifax and climate action goals as well, and how we deal with this in a cost-effective way. But I just want to put in there riparian buffers. We got to make sure we're protecting the riparian buffers, and we're not. So yeah, throw that in there for you, Kenda. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, we have a motion on the table and.
Sorry, I have a question. Madam
Sorry,
Chair?
and just 1 second. The MOU is just to do with the infrastructure. And so Commissioner Cuddle's questions will fall into that broader conversation. Let's put the motion out there and then we'll go back to you, Commissioner Sahara, for the follow-up. Can I have someone make the motion, item 8?
So I have a question about the memorandum MOU itself.
Oh, okay, we'll take the question. Go ahead.
Sorry. So I understand that this MOU is the follow-up on the previous interim agreement that was between the HRM and Halifax Water. Now we're formalizing the framework with the HRM.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
No, you go for it, Kendra.
This framework and the percentages that are illustrated in the table, it just provides the consistent structure for how we evaluate and manage different types of projects. In the past, and it very closely resembles what was established in the 2013 agreement that expired in 2015. So it just allows staff from a capital perspective and from a larger planning perspective to have that consistent application of cost based on responsibilities going forward.
Okay, so then the question in the previous round in the framework that was in force between 2013 to 2015, were there any concerns from Halifax Water side that were not addressed in this framework? Because this MOU, in my understanding, was approved by the HRM Council, and we also have councillors on the board here. So I just want to, is there any lessons learned? Are there any concerns from the previous one that were addressed in the current MOU, and if there Halifax Water, kind of to proceed with this framework in, incorporating any of the lessons learned from the previous round?
Yes, so there was, and this was, we have a special technical committee that meets between HRM staff and Halifax Water staff on joint stormwater issues and to provide clarity and direction on responsibilities. And so stemming from some lessons learned on previous projects and or operational activities, we collaboratively came up with this tool. It doesn't look like in the first round, so there was some back and forth negotiations and explaining and debating on who's responsible for what. So Halifax Water's interests are I guess reflected in the table, and we came up with what we thought was fair and equitable to the customers and to the residents.
Good, thank you.
Do I have a commissioner to make the motion?
I can make the motion.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Lovelace.
I move it is recommended that the Halifax Water Board approves the Memorandum of Understanding between HRM and Halifax Water for the funding of stormwater projects as is provided in Appendix A of this report.
The seconder, Commissioner Cuddle for second. I just had one question. How have we been handling this between 2015 and 2022?
So we've basically been using this as a framework when the projects did arise with the capital team predominantly. So we've been going on a case-by-case, getting cost-sharing arrangements and documenting those through that process. So this will allow a bit more flexibility and we can be a little bit more nimble with them.
Thank you. Any other questions? We'll call for the vote with the motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. So I do note we're at 3 minutes to 12, but we have one last item. I'm hoping people can remain for 5 extra minutes.
Actually, Madam Chair, we can defer that item. It
Okay.
may generate some discussion, and so rather than people feeling rushed, it can be deferred to the September meeting.
we will take that offer with 2 minutes remaining. Thank you, Heidi. And we note all of the information reports that were submitted, both for submission to the Utility Review Board as well as for the information of the board. Thank you to the staff and excellent work on the filings to the Utility Review Board. Thank you for those. I believe we've completed the agenda with the deferral of item 9. We'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon provides that motion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Halifax Water Annual General Meeting is on July 14th. We hope you will all be attending, and it is open to the public. Thank you.
We'll see you then.
Thanks.